Welcome back to Dragonfall. We got the last of the discs repaired and decoded, so we did that last episode. At this point, where's Dante's? I don't know why he's got the... I've never seen him do his little squat animation actually before, I don't think. He even rubs his little head. His big head. His unreasonably sized head for his body. Anyway, we need to talk to Paul. We need to talk to Paul, I said. As you step forward, the rest of your team falls silent. Amsel shifts its attention to you. You can see the worry on his face. Alice, I have new information. I'm afraid that the news isn't good. So you said over the comm. Go on, we're listening. 2 years ago, a large shipment of highly lethal radioactive bioweapon disappeared en route to storage facility in Dresden. The weapon was designated X-15. I have traced the path of the missing shipment. It was delivered to the Harfield Manor. Well, that sounds horrible. It is. I've heard of this stuff before. Back in the service, we called it Doom. I've never run across it in the wild, but I've heard enough horror stories to know that I don't want to. The stories that you've heard are correct. This Doom is an extremely dangerous substance. He gestures to a technical document on his computer's display. I've been reading up. To this day, the story of Doom remains a cautionary tale in biotech circles. Monoclonal antibody technology is strictly regulated now, and this substance is one of the reasons why. What does this stuff do exactly? Amsel clears his throat and reads aloud from the information on his screen. Doom kills by destroying a host's muscle tissue via radioactive decay. Each individual Doom antibody is bound to a radioactive bismuth-212 isotope. When introduced into the host, these antibodies bind to surface-level muscle tissue. The tissue is then killed with alpha radiation. The process repeats itself until the host wastes away and dies. I don't think that makes sense. As I've mentioned before, I am not a nuclear engineer of any kind. I talked about this during the Chernobyl video. But okay, antibodies are basically a complex protein strand, and the way radiation destroys stuff is basically bombarding it until it tears itself apart. I'm extremely heavily simplifying, obviously, but there's also multiple kinds of radiation, and alpha radiation is the most prevalent, but also generally the least dangerous. I'd say that relatively speaking, and it's not, it's not exactly a direct tier list. But I don't think, one, that would be the least efficient way to apply radiation to a person. If you're just trying to kill somebody with radiation, you just nuke them. I don't know why you would bother to go through this process unless, maybe I'm jumping the gun because we're only reading the top bit of this so far, but I don't think alpha radiation would be your priority. I don't know what the decay path is for bismuth-212. So I don't even know if alpha decay is the what would come out of that. I am skeptical. And are they suggesting that if they're antibodies, then they're incredibly simple. They're not like they're not like a virus or a bacteria. They're not self-replicating. They don't do anything else. So what it sounds like you're doing is poisoning people with radioactive gas with extra steps. Why? if I'm way off base on this and somebody knows better, call me out. But I don't think this makes any sense. Not that I want to nitpick this. Obviously, the gravity of this situation is what really matters. But, you know, especially if you're going to say stuff that's actual science, give me a good reason to believe it? Jesus. Iger nods grimly. I've heard that Doom was deployed in a couple of border skirmishes back in 41. After seeing what it did to people up close, the UCAS passed a unilateral ban on the stuff. If that doesn't tell you how bad it is, nothing will. Okay, so I hesitate to ask, what would a dragon want with this Drek? Nothing good. That much goes without saying. This development worries me, Alice. It worries me greatly. If the dragon is stockpiling bioweapons, we've got an even bigger problem than we thought on our hands. There's a moment of silence, then Dietrich speaks up. Well, in my book, this doesn't change anything. I mean, it ups the stakes if the Firewing's allowed to carry out her plans, whatever those might be, but we're going to stop her before that happens. That was always the plan. As far as I'm concerned, it's still the plan now. I agree with Dietrich. We need to focus on what's in front of us. Whatever the dragon's larger plans might be, the fact is that she's after us. We shouldn't let ourselves get distracted by anything else. Amsel is slow to respond. Finally, he nods. Yes, I concur. For the time being, we must continue forward. And that means that you must continue working towards raising Alice's fee. I'll leave the matter in your capable hands, Alice. When you've acquired the necessary funds and are ready to head back out to the rabbit hole, let me know. From there, we will discuss our next steps. Good. If you need me, I'll be getting prepped for the next run. Which you probably won't be going on. Right behind you, love. Dietrich casts a backwards glance at Glory. If any of this has an impact on her, she doesn't show it. Come on, Glory, let's go. Ooh, game choked a little there. Alright, let's talk to everybody again, I guess. That really seems like it was supposed to have a gravity that it didn't. Both because technically speaking, how the weapon works doesn't actually make a lot of sense to me. But more so than that, it was just sort of like, all they really said was the Firewing has bioweapons, and then they even themselves undercut it by saying, well, it doesn't matter, because we're gonna either fix it or we won't. And we're not getting a lot of details about the Firewing's reign of terror, but, like, how much of this bioweaponry does she have? Is it actually dramatically worse? I mean, in terms of how you die, it's worse, but is it dramatically worse than, you know, just raining fire from the sky on towns and cities? I don't know. It's hard to track whether this is even the Firewing or some shade of the shadow of the Firewing, or if it's just like a cult of personality of some kind. We're presuming not, especially after what we heard from Green Winter's last episode, and that, like, the Firewing is still in some manner alive and wants to return for vengeance. But then, like, we still have very little insight into the Firewing herself, the group that is trying to help resurrect the Firewing, or what any of their, like, motivations or interests are. They haven't really thrown out any threats. We're still working on the assumption that we're still basically working on the original premise of the game, which is we went on a run, it went bad, the situation, it was so bad that we, like, investigated more and discovered this whole, like, long conspiracy of sorts, and we assume that it's super bad. But we don't really know a lot more details beyond that. They haven't made demands or threats or unless I'm forgetting something. This is episode 99, I believe. So, it's possible I've forgotten something in all this time. But I don't think so. Anyway, let's talk to folks, see if there's new dialogue now. Alice, greetings. Amsel peers at you through the battered old pair of wired room glasses. There's something, I think this is old dialogue. Yeah. Okay. Dietrich, that's a new place for you to stand. Yeah, looks like we're gonna get some more story here. Any updates on Alexander? Nothing new, boss. Any thoughts about the last run? There was nothing about that run that didn't disgust me. What they did to that troll, he shudders. It wasn't right, boss, on any level. I don't care what anyone else tells you. You listen to me, Alice. What you did, killing that thing, it was the right call. Yeah, it cost us some new yen, but letting that thing live would have been a travesty. Back when we took on Humanus, you said that you fought in the Night of Rage. I'd like to hear more about that. You know, I wish these dialogue options, I wish this wasn't just like a meander around and check everybody between episodes or between missions thing. I wish there was a more dedicated, like, now is our downtime, we're all going to hang out, like, share stories. I assume they've either have already or don't want to share stories with each other, so it sort of makes sense for it to be limited to me, but like just the gotta check everyone to see if they're willing to share another story with me thing is a little annoying. Anyway, he nods, then fishes in his jacket pocket for his flask. All right, boss, we can talk about it. So I already mentioned that Berlin's punks and anarchists joined forces to fight off the racists, right? And after a long, bloody fight, we beat them. What I didn't mention is how I figured into all this. I'm an anarchist at heart, always have been, but at the time I fit squarely into the punk camp. I was 32 at the time. Messerkampf was still touring, not so much as we did when we were kids, but we had a following. I guess it was sort of an elder statesman for the scene. When we rallied to fight the racists, my followers came along for the ride. Bunch of young kids, all full of piss and vinegar and the immortality of youth. I was full of that good Dragon Slayer spirit, pissed off and itching for a fight, and so I led kids into the fray. They waded into the riot right alongside me, yelling and screaming and with their fists in the air. I don't remember a whole lot of the fight itself, boss, but I do remember the aftermath. A lot of the kids that followed me had grown up listening to my music. They had all of my attitude, Alice, but none of them had my magic. And youthful enthusiasm is no defense against a knife or a handgun. I left the punk scene for all the reasons I told you, boss, but there was a bigger reason, and I saw it in those kids' broken bodies. This road that I'm on, it leads you to the grave. I've got the power to make it a leisurely trip, but make no mistake, it's where I'm headed. Those kids tried to follow in my footsteps, and they wound up sprinting ahead of me instead. Better for me to stay out of the public eye and stick to the shadows. My stint as a role model was ill-advised. Have you put any thought into what I talked about earlier? Yeah, boss, I have. It's an interesting idea, but there are risks. I'm thinking that this might not be the best of times to approach him about it. He's the source of my magic, remember? If our discussion turned into an argument, he could take all of that magic back in a heartbeat, and then where would we be? I doubt, not to metagame too much, but I doubt the game would just take it away from me and cripple him as a character. From what you've told me about the Dragon Slayer, I don't think he'd like the way you're talking. Since when has he ever encouraged you to back down from a fight? You've got a point there, boss. He wouldn't want me to back down ever, not even from him. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. I'll ask the Dragon Slayer about shifting priorities, I guess you'd say. Taking on some deserving organization and calling off the hunt for something more impressive than the Firewing. Of course, Fight like that would never really end. I'm never going to bring down a corp or a polyclub on my lonesome. He shrugs. But maybe that's not a bad thing. It'd take a lot of the guesswork out of life. I don't know, boss. If you have any thoughts about this, I'd love to hear them. Why you tie yourself to a specific group? I say keep it fluid. Stomp anyone who threatens the flux. Isn't that what Berlin is all about? He cocks his head. Interesting. It's a different approach, but I like it. Hang on a second. I'll ask. He closes his eyes and concentrates. Minutes pass. Slowly a smile creeps across his face. Dietrich opens his eyes and turns to face you. Yeah, I think he'd like this plan just fine. That was it? That was all it took? The Dragon Slayer doesn't mince words, boss. If he doesn't like a plan, he'd have told me. Dietrich's grin widens. He looks more at ease than you've ever seen him. Well, boss, I've got myself a plan and a new target to boot. That's assuming, of course, that any of us make it through our current predicament alive. You know, Dietrich, now that you've got a handle on your connection with the Dragon Slayer, you could probably reach out to your old community again. Berlin's punks could benefit from your experience. He nods. Yeah, boss. I was thinking the same thing. Maybe I could give back a bit, fix some of the damage I caused in my misspent youth. After we're finished dealing with the crisis in front of us, that is. It's a good thought, anyway. I'll keep it in mind. Good chat. All right. Gonna break, and we'll come back and talk to the rest of the team. See you guys then.